Today we're out here in the forest with one of the newest compact luxury crossovers in America, the all-new Alfa Romeo Stelvio. As you've probably guessed by just looking at the Stelvio, this is the close cousin to the Alfa Romeo Giulia, which we recently reviewed here at Alex on Autos. That is their compact luxury sedan that competes with things like the BMW 3 Series and the Mercedes-Benz C-Class. Logically then, the Stelvio is the direct competitor to the Mercedes-Benz GLC, the BMW X3, and of course the Audi Q5. Crossover sales are on fire in America, so it's pretty obvious why Alfa created a crossover from the Giulia. But this is entering a very, very competitive segment. Not only do we have a segment that has grown in recent years with newer entries like the Lexus NX and of course the Porsche Macan, but also because the main entries in this compact crossover segment have all been redesigned for 2018. We have an all-new Audi Q5, a very recently redone Mercedes-Benz GLC, an all-new BMW X3, an all-new Volvo XC60, the brand new Porsche Macan, and a recently refreshed Lexus NX, even though the NX itself is only a few years old. So in this video, we're going to be answering the important questions of how does this stack up with the rest of the direct European competition, and we'll also be asking the question, what is it that the Stelvio brings to the table that you don't find in the competition? It's pretty typical for mainstream crossovers to look different than the sedan counterparts in their manufacturer's lineup. However, in the luxury segment, it's more typical for the sedan and the crossover to look very similar. And that's definitely what we see in the Stelvio versus the Giulia. We have exactly the same kind of grille going on, very similar headlamps and very similar grille openings lower on the front bumper. Creating a design that works well in a car that has a much smaller front end and a crossover is something that not every manufacturer gets right. I think this front end works better than what we see in the Porsche Macan or the Porsche Cayenne, where they're trying to turn a Porsche 911-like front end into a crossover, but I don't think this is quite as attractive as the brand new Volvo XC60. The model we're driving has well-integrated parking sensors up front. We have a radar cruise control sensor right over there on the passenger side. There's an LED strip right here inside these headlamps, but the headlamps themselves are not LEDs. These are actually HIDs, but they do steer in the corner. The turn signals are integrated into the lamp module just below that LED trim strip. When creating the Giulia and this related Stelvio, Alfa Romeo decided to target the sporty end of both the compact luxury sedan segment and the compact luxury crossover segment. And to that end, they made this a rear-wheel drive vehicle with a perfect 50-50 weight balance. That's something that Alfa Romeo has not tried in a very, very long time. But it is obvious when you look at this in the side profile, because we have a long hood up front that's fairly upright, very much like we see in a BMW X3, and then we have a somewhat more compact body behind it than we find in the front-wheel drive entries in this segment, like the Lexus NX. We've seen certain companies like Cadillac attack traditional European luxury segments with a vehicle that's sort of a half step larger than their direct competitors. But that's not going on with the Stelvio. At 184.5 inches long, this is almost exactly the same size as the Macan and only 1 inch larger than a BMW X3. Moving to the rear, we find a large and relatively vertical hatch. You'll notice the license plate is on the hatch itself, not on the body. We have tail lamp modules that wrap from the body on over to the tailgate lid, but this lid portion right here is really just an accent section. Just about everything else is over here on the body. The tailgate is where we find the rear fog lamps that are activated right here, but the brake lights and the turn signals are over here on the body side. Although there are a variety of diesel engines offered in Europe and other world markets, in America we have just 2 gasoline engines. Things start out with the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that we're driving right here. It produces 280 horsepower and 306 pound-feet of torque. That is notably more power and more torque than we find in any other base model in this segment. A number of us in the industry are expecting Alfa to give us about 350 horsepower in a mid-level engine option sometime soon, but at the moment we really only have 2. The 280 horsepower engine right here, and then the absolutely insane twin-turbo 2.9-liter V6 that produces 505 horsepower. That engine is essentially a 6-cylinder version of a Ferrari V8 that we find under the hood of the Ferrari 488. You might be wondering how this engine lineup stacks up to the competition. Well, the base model that we're driving right here is significantly faster and more powerful than the base engine in the Mercedes-Benz GLC or the Volvo XC60. It's also more powerful than the base engine that we find in the BMW X3. But it's not as powerful as the AMG 43 engine that we find in the GLC, or of course the 3-liter 6-cylinder in the X3. But the 2.9-liter twin-turbo V6 is a pretty crazy engine, and there really is no direct corollary in the Audi lineup, in the Volvo lineup, or even in the BMW lineup. Really, the only other entry in this compact luxury crossover segment that has this kind of power under the hood would be the thoroughly insane GLC 63 AMG. Both engines are mated to a ZF 8-speed automatic transmission, and if you get the model that we're driving right here, which is the all-wheel drive 2-liter turbo, you'll get 24 miles per gallon combined. That surprised me just a little bit because this is 400 pounds lighter than an Audi Q5, but the Q5 will actually get you 1 mile per gallon better in its competitive model. I'm going to give this model 7 out of 10 points for our front seat comfort score. That's mainly because of the range of motion of this driver's seat. For some reason, the seat bottom cushion only moves up and down from the back. You cannot tilt the seat like you can in most of the competition. We do find a 4-way adjustable lumbar support and a manually extending thigh cushion, but these are not going to be as comfortable as the mainstream seats that we find in the Volvo XC60, the Mercedes-Benz GLC, or of course the BMW X3. To help the Stelvio adjust to a wider range of driver sizes, we have a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion, and we have a 3-position seat memory over here on the driver's door. As we see in most European luxury vehicles, the passenger seat has the same range of motion as the driver's seat. Overall rear seat comfort is good for this category, but legroom is not quite as generous as we see in something like the new Volvo XC60. It's also worth noting that these rear seats don't recline like we find in many of the competitors. If I move over to the right side of the vehicle, where this front seat was all the way back in its tracks, you'll notice that I still have a little bit of legroom left. The model we're driving has a large panoramic moonroof, but even if I sit upright in this back seat, my hair is not touching the ceiling. I have about an inch of headroom left. If I move over to the middle seat, however, we definitely have a reduction in headroom because of this panoramic moonroof, and I do have to cock my head to one side in order to sit upright. To help make the rear of the Stelvio feel a little bit wider than some of the competition, they padded this bolster section right over here on each side of the rear seat back. That section does not fold with the rear seats. The rear seats would fold right here along this line, and this is where the shoulder belt comes out of. That makes this a little bit softer if you do end up pushing yourself over there closer towards the door. The seat belt for the center seat position comes out of the outboard seat, but the center seat folds independently of each side. This is a 40-20-40 folding seat back. But this is not a completely independent center seat, because if we fold this seat back, then the center section does fold with it, although this does allow you to put very large items inside the cabin. Rear passengers have a fold-down center armrest with 2 large cup holders as well. Behind this hatch, we find 18.5 cubic feet of cargo capacity. That is a little on the low side for a compact luxury crossover. However, I was still able to fit 5 of our 24-inch roller bags back here because this cargo area is very, very square, and it's also fairly upright. However, as we see in a variety of different crossovers, the glass section of the rear hatch does tilt forward quite a bit, and that reduces cargo practicality. If we lift up the load floor, we don't find a spare tire, but we do find some additional cargo area. However, the battery is strangely right in the middle of it, and that really reduces the amount of cargo practicality back here. A practical touch back here is that we can recline the rear seat backs from the cargo area or from the passenger area. Taking a spin around the interior, again you can see that shoulder belt right there, part of that side bolster in the rear seat. The model that we're driving has the large panoramic moonroof, and we are in the TI trim, which stands for Turismo Internacional. The driver and the front passenger get height adjustable seat belts, and the front headrests have the Alfa Romeo logo embossed right there in the center. The front seats are heavily bolstered. They feature a perforated center section, although the seats are not ventilated, they are just heated in our model. From this angle, you can also see that manually extending thigh cushion up front. As we see in most compact luxury vehicles, the front doors are a combination of hard and soft plastics. The upper 2/3 of the door are made primarily from soft plastics and leather touches, and then we have hard plastics down on the lower third of the door, right around that storage compartment and integrated bottle holder. The overall dashboard design is very similar to the Alfa Romeo Giulia, which is quite logical because, again, this is the crossover version of the Giulia. So we have an injection molded upper portion of the dashboard. Below the injection molded dash component, we have real wood trim, a round air vent over there on the passenger side, and then soft plastics for the lower portion of the dash. The glove compartment is a bin-style design. It was not able to accommodate large tablet computers, however smaller ones might fit in there. Nestled in the center of the dashboard is Alfa Romeo's all-new infotainment and navigation system. For better or worse, this software has no relation to any other FCA vehicle that we see in America. Maseratis use a version of Chrysler's Uconnect system that we see in Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, Dodge vehicles, etc., but this software is completely unique. There are some similarities between the way this software operates and the Mercedes Command or BMW iDrive system because it does use a rotary controller in the center console, and it does use nested menus as well, so we can toggle the controller side to side to view different portions of the screen. At the moment, this software does not support Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and the navigation interface is fairly basic. However, Alfa has promised to support smartphone app integration shortly, perhaps in the next software release. It's our understanding that shoppers that buy an Alfa Romeo now may be able to add that feature later. I have to say that overall this infotainment system disappointed me a little bit. We don't find the same level of functionality or smartphone integration that we find in the average luxury vehicle in this segment, and the input method is not as intuitive as the BMW or Audi systems in my mind. Even if Alfa adds Android Auto and Apple CarPlay to this system later, it does not feature a touchscreen, which would make interacting with CarPlay a little less intuitive than the latest BMW iDrive systems. Below the infotainment screen, we find two large air vents, the controls for the dual-zone automatic climate control, a single USB input, and a 12-volt power port. Continuing down from that, we find two large cup holders, and in between those cup holders we have a slot where you could very easily put large smartphones right like that, and this area has a roller cover that covers them up when not in use. Alfa uses a joystick-style shifter, very much like we see in BMW models. There's an unlock button right here on the back of the shifter. We click that button and pull towards the driver for drive, push away from the driver for reverse. If you want to engage the manual mode and you're in drive, you simply pull the shifter over towards the driver. We push away from the driver for gear change down, pull towards the driver for gear up. If you want to park the car, we simply press the P button and the shifter returns to center. Behind the shifter, we find the drive mode selector. This allows us to choose between three different drive modes. Advanced efficiency is what A stands for, natural, which is the normal mode, and dynamic, which is sort of the sport mode for this car. A nice touch with the Alfa Romeo, the car stays in the mode that you have selected even when you turn the car off and turn it back on. So if you like your Alfa to always stay in dynamic mode, you just rotate that to D and leave it right there. Behind that, we have the rotary controller for the infotainment system. There's a menu button on one side, an option button on the other, and although this looks like it might offer finger writing recognition like we see in BMW and Audi models, it does not. It is just a plain plastic knob. You'll find the volume and track forward-backward toggle over here on the right side. We toggle it side to side for track forward-backward, press it down to turn the system on and off, and of course rotate around for the volume. In case you're wondering, this is what the Stelvio's key looks like. You can see that this is quite different than most of FCA's keys. We have a double click for the rear hatch, double click to start the engine, unlock, lock, and of course a panic button below. Between the front seats, we find a padded center armrest. This opens to reveal a fairly small storage cubby that's pretty typical with rear-wheel drive luxury crossovers because the drive shaft is, of course, under this area. We still, however, have enough room for keys, wallets, smartphones, that sort of thing. There's an additional USB port in here, and this is also where you'll find the auxiliary port for the infotainment system. In the center of everything, we have a color multifunction display. This gives us our typical trip computer readouts. We also get some additional readouts depending on the mode that we're in. So if you're in the dynamic mode, we have a G meter, and if we're in the efficient mode, then we get a readout telling us how efficiently we've been driving. The display also gives you a digital speedometer and, of course, infotainment readouts right there up top. The steering wheel is a distinctive 3-spoke design. We have a split spoke at the bottom, aggressive sport grips up top, and a flat bottom. You'll notice that the paddle shifters are attached to the column, not the steering wheel. Although this is not my personal preference, I am told that this is the preferred choice for professional drivers. You'll find the down paddle over here on the left and the up paddle over here on the right. On the left side of the wheel, we find the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control system and the engine start-stop button. This location did take a little bit of getting used to. On the right side of the wheel, we find the controls for the infotainment system, a voice command button, and a dedicated phone button. The first thing you'll notice about the Stelvio out on the road is that Alfa Romeo definitely has sporty driving in mind. 0 to 60 happened in a blistering 5.4 seconds. That is incredibly fast for a base model in the United States. Keep in mind that a base Mercedes or BMW crossover with which this competes will be a full second slower 0 to 60. Even something like a base Q5, which has a very, very respectable 5.8 second 0 to 60, is going to be almost a half second slower than this. And of course, this is using a traditional 8-speed automatic transmission, not a dual clutch transmission like we see in the Audi. Audi's dual clutch is very, very smooth, but it still is a dual clutch transmission, and it's not going to be quite as smooth as this ZF 8-speed, and it's going to have higher long-term maintenance costs as well. The Stelvio's 0 to 60 time is even more impressive when you start taking a look at what it would take to get a competitive vehicle to go this fast 0 to 60. You'd be talking about a Porsche Macan S, and that would only be about 0.2 of a second faster, or a Volvo XC60 T6, which would be about 0.2 of a second slower than this. And of course, if you want to go even faster, you could get the 505 horsepower Stelvio, and that would get you 0 to 60 in a blistering 3.7 seconds. Now let's talk about the way this engine delivers its power. Redline happens right at 5,700 RPM, and that's because of the way that they have decided to tune the turbo. The massive amount of torque that we see in this engine reminds me a little bit of a small modern diesel engine. And we do get a little bit of turbo lag in this engine. So if you're just driving along sedately right like this, and the engine's spinning perhaps 1,000, 1,500 RPM, and we floor the vehicle, there is a moment before the pressure builds and then we start accelerating. That's more noticeable in this vehicle than in something like Volvo's XC60 T6, or a 3-liter turbocharged BMW X3, or a Mercedes-Benz GLC 43 AMG. But those aren't really competitors to the Stelvio TI. This is actually the competitor, again, to the 2-liter X3, or the base T5 version of the Volvo, or the Mercedes GLC 300. And in that comparison, even though we get a little bit more turbo lag out of this engine, we get a massive increase in power. The other thing that's really helping acceleration in the Stelvio is the curb weight. This is about 600 pounds lighter than a Volvo or a Porsche Macan. We stop from 60 miles an hour back to 0 in 125 feet, which is fairly good for this segment. It could be a little bit shorter if they were to put grippier tires on this car. The tires that Alfa decided to put on the Stelvio are just a little bit of a letdown for me because they're not as grippy as I would like. However, Alfa did decide to put very wide tires on this model. We have 225 width tires, and that means that it would be a very simple matter to upgrade these tires aftermarket, and you'd get incredible handling grip as well as a lower braking score. Even with the tire choice, I'm going to have to give handling an A because this is an absolute blast to drive out on your favorite winding mountain road, even a less than perfect road surface like we're driving on here. All of the systems in the Stelvio are just masterfully designed. The suspension is excellent. It doesn't get upset over broken pavement. The steering is quick and precise. It's very easy to tell exactly what the vehicle is doing. And I have bags blowing around in the back there. This is just an absolute hoot. Again, the tires are just a little bit of a letdown because we're getting a little bit of squeal here and there, but even so, the grip is very, very good. And this handles better than any of the base direct competition. And honestly, even in this form, it is a solid competitor to something like the Audi SQ5, and that really is high praise. Straight from the dealer, the SQ5 will handle a little bit better because of the grippier tires that it has on it. But if you were to put the same tires on that Audi as on this model, this would be more fun. Out on rougher roads like this gravel road, it's obvious that the Stelvio has a sportier mission in mind than something like the BMW X3 or the Mercedes-Benz GLC. Of course, keep in mind that we are driving the TI Sport trim, but this suspension is just about as firm as the GLC 43 AMG or perhaps the Audi SQ5, so it is fairly firm for an entry-level compact crossover. I think that this model is just a little bit too firm for my taste, just a little bit too firm for a daily driver. If, however, you're looking to inject a little bit of sport into your daily commute, then this is definitely going to be the option for you. Cabin noise is well controlled in the Stelvio. We scored 71 decibels at 50 miles an hour, although it is worth noting that we get more engine noise in the cabin and it's a little less refined than the engine noise that we see in the Mercedes or the BMW. I think that just has to do with the design of this particular 4-cylinder engine. This sounds a little bit more like the Volvo XC60, and a few people have complained about the engine noise that we see in that cabin as well. Over a week of mixed driving, we've been averaging 23.7 miles per gallon, which is basically what the EPA says we should get. This is rated for 24 miles per gallon combined. Basically, every compact luxury crossover in America gets right around 24 miles per gallon in the base model. However, if you want better fuel economy, it is available in this segment, because the Audi Q5 gets 1 mile per gallon better, and if you wanted even better fuel economy than that, there is a Lexus NX hybrid, and that will get you over 30 miles per gallon combined. But it's not going to be anywhere near as fun as the Stelvio. The Stelvio is quite simply one of the most fun compact crossovers you can buy in America, not just for a base model, but overall really, and we are again still talking about the base model of the Stelvio. However, you should know that there are a few things that you won't find in this cabin that you will find in the competition. We don't find active lane keeping assistance systems, we don't find any semi-autonomous driving systems, although we do have a pre-collision warning and autonomous braking system available. The lack of those active driving assistance sort of fits the personality of the Stelvio, however, because this is very performance focused, and we don't find all the same gadgets and gizmos that we find other places in the car either. The navigation and infotainment system, as I said earlier, we don't have those active driving systems. We also don't find any autonomous parking systems or 360-degree camera systems available. Instead, this is very focused on the driving experience. Alfa Romeo has priced the Stelvio very aggressively. It starts at $41,990, and keep in mind that the 280 horsepower engine is standard. The TI trim that we were testing this week started at $43,995, and as equipped it was right around $49,000. As you'll notice on your screen, the Stelvio comes very well equipped in its base and in the TI trim. However, it is worth noting that we don't have the same level of options and gadgets available on the Stelvio that we do find on the competition, and that is one thing that our base equipment chart here at Alex & Autos does not really show. It's best to look at the Stelvio as a very performance-oriented vehicle in this category. The 0 to 60 time of 5.4 seconds is very fast for a base model in this segment. It actually is very good for a mid-level trim in this segment, to be honest. Braking distances are quite short, handling is excellent with the Stelvio. However, again, it falls down a little bit when it comes to gadgets and optional luxuries. You won't find the same level of luxury touches and options available in this cabin that we do see in entries like the Volvo XC60 or the Mercedes-Benz. You also don't find the same level of active safety technology that we find in the mainstream European offerings. Although we expect Android Auto and Apple CarPlay to be available in the Stelvio's infotainment system at some point in 2018, it's not available at this point in time in the United States. The level of polish that we see in MMI and the latest version of BMW's iDrive are definitely above what we see in the Stelvio. However, the Stelvio again trades that off for a massive amount of power in the base model. Something that kept coming to my mind while I was driving the Stelvio this week was that the level of polish is just not up to the same standard as we see in the European competition. This is a really difficult thing to describe, but it's just the way that the vehicle's systems seem to interact with one another or interact with the driver, and the way that they're put together or thought out. A good example of this is the lane departure warning system. The volume of the beep is tied with the infotainment system's volume, and it's designed to be louder than the infotainment system. That means that if you have the volume cranked up on the radio because you're rocking out to your favorite tune and then you cross a lane line without signaling, it really is a jarring announcement because the lane departure beep is very loud. It's the little things like that that bugged me during my week with the Stelvio. Some of those options in the competition can be adjusted independently of the main volume control. In the Stelvio, they can't. Now let's move on to our first competitor, the Volvo XC60. Starting at $41,500, the XC60 is a little bit less expensive than the Stelvio, and we actually find a little bit more standard equipment depending on what matters to you. However, the base XC60 is a front-wheel drive vehicle, and it's going to go from 0 to 60 about a second slower than the Stelvio. So if you're looking for the best performance buy in a base model, the Stelvio is without question one of the best buys available in the compact luxury crossover segment. And it isn't just handling where the Stelvio excels versus the XC60 base trim. It also excels when it comes to handling and stopping distance. On the other hand, the Volvo will give you more comfortable seats, a more premium feeling interior, and better gadgets than we find in the Stelvio. Volvo has been very aggressive at trying to push their latest autonomous safety systems down into lower-end trims and even base models. So we find greater levels of standard safety equipment in the XC60, and their active safety systems are more attainable than in most trims of the competition. The XC60 also has a large and practical cargo area and a very comfortable back seat. On the other hand, if you want to get the same level of performance and handling ability in your Volvo that we do find in the base Alfa, you're going to have to pay quite a bit more for the Volvo. Next up, we have the Audi Q5, which also starts at $41,500. In terms of overall value, the Q5 and the XC60 have long been two of the best European buys in the compact luxury crossover segment, but the Alfa really does give both of them a run for its money with its excellent base performance. Although the engine is oriented a little bit differently in the Q5 than the XC60, The Q5 and the XC60 are not as well balanced as the Stelvio out on the road when it comes to overall weight balance and therefore overall handling ability, especially for taking a look at the base models. It's also worth noting that the Q5 uses Audi's latest dual-clutch automatic transmission, and that dual-clutch transmission does have higher expected maintenance costs than the standard automatics that we see in the competition. When it comes to overall performance, the Q5 does fairly well in this segment, with the base model going 0 to 60 in 5.8 seconds. That is notably faster than the base 0 to 60 times that we find in most of the competition, of course with the exception of the Alfa, and the Alfa is nearly a half second faster, and that's a pretty big difference. So as with the Volvo comparison, if you want the better polished gadgets, gizmos, etc., then go with the Audi. If you want the better performing model, go with the Alfa. At this point, it's also worth noting that there is an Audi SQ5. I mentioned the SQ5 because at the moment there is no middle child in the Alfa lineup. We have the 280 horsepower base model and then the over 500 horsepower performance model, and there's nothing in the 300 to 400 horsepower range where we do find entries from the European competition. Next up we have the BMW X3. The X3 starts a little bit more expensive than some of the competition, as we have sometimes seen with comparable BMW models. $42,450 will buy you an X3 that will get you from 0 to 60 in 6 seconds. That is notably slower than the Alfa. Like the Alfa, the BMW X3 has a near perfect weight balance, and that means when it comes to overall handling ability, it is very competitive to the base Alfa model, but it doesn't feel quite as engaging. BMW has decided in the last few years to make their models have a little bit broader appeal, and as a result they've softened them a little bit and they're not quite as hardcore performance machines as BMWs used to be. Now personally, I like that change in BMW, but it does mean that if you're looking for the best performance in a base model, it's still going to be the Alfa, even when you compare it to the BMW X3. It's also worth noting that although there is plenty of power available in the X3 lineup, you're going to have to pay an awful lot more for your X3 if you want to get it from 0 to 60 faster than the Alfa. Oddly enough for BMW, there is no direct corollary to the top-end performance version of the Alfa Romeo either. The M Performance version of the BMW X3, in theory, does business with models like the GLC 43 AMG, the Volvo XC60 T8, and the Audi SQ5. But at this point in time, if you want to go over 500 horsepower, then you're pretty much limited to the Mercedes, or interestingly enough, the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. There are, of course, a ton of luxury compact crossovers in America, and I couldn't compare the Stelvio to them all. So instead, I'm going to have to stop this at the Jaguar F-Pace. The F-Pace is a logical competitor, not just because it's coming from a smaller European manufacturer, but also because the F-Pace definitely has performance in mind. Jaguar spent a great deal of time making sure that the F-Pace was one of the most fun to drive compact crossovers in this particular segment. Likely because Jaguar and Alfa Romeo are both smaller volume manufacturers, the Jaguar also falls behind the other European entries when it comes to gadgets, gizmos, and luxury options. So we won't find seats that are quite as comfortable as the Mercedes or the Volvo inside the F-Pace's cabin, and we won't find gadgets that are up to the same level as BMW's iDrive or Audi's MMI system. On the other hand, the F-Pace is an awful lot of fun to drive. In terms of direct comparisons, however, the F-Pace in base form is going to be notably slower than the Alfa. It's actually about a full second slower 0 to 60. That's because the base engine is notably less powerful. And of course, the F-Pace's systems are tuned a little bit differently than the Alfa's, and that's why even if we get the nearly 300 horsepower 2-liter engine under the hood of the F-Pace, it's still not going to go 0 to 60 as fast as the Alfa Romeo. That comes in right around 5.7 seconds, and it's still going to be more expensive than the Alfa at $47,775 starting. Although Jaguar's infotainment systems feel a little bit behind the times compared to BMW or Audi's latest systems, they definitely feel better polished than what we see in the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Now it's time for the bottom line. The Stelvio is without a doubt a hoot and a half to drive. This is easily the most fun base model in this particular segment. And if you're shopping only for base models, then the Alfa Romeo Stelvio makes a good argument for itself. On the other hand, when it comes to living with the car every day, as much fun as the Stelvio is, I would take the Audi Q5 or the Volvo XC60 over the Stelvio, and the Audi and the Volvo are still my top two picks in this segment. The XC60 and the Q5 are very well-rounded vehicles. The infotainment systems are definitely a notch above what we see in the Stelvio. We get more active safety systems available and standard in these particular models, and we also find a higher level of luxury, especially in the Volvo XC60. Although the Volvo and the Audi are not going to put quite as big of a smile on your face when the road starts to curve, the other aspects of those vehicles really are what make them my top pick. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Be sure and hit that subscribe button down there at the bottom of your screen. More subscribers help us get access to vehicles like the Stelvio. You can also head over to patreon.com if you want to support this channel, and I hope you do. If you want to see what we're driving this week, you can head over to facebook.com/AlexandAutos and see what we're driving right now. I'll see you next week.